Good Good afternoon. Thank you, class. Of course, now that we've moved it indoor, the sun has come out. I hope that's still a good sign, though. Welcome to the office hours. My name is Fred Stern. I represent the trend of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We are a volunteer organization whose mission is to promote writing and writers on the institution grounds, and we hope even beyond, by supporting and supplementing the activities of the institution's Writers Center. We sponsor several events every week. On Sundays at 5 o'clock in the Prose Room right across the hall, we have an open mic session for readers and listeners 18 years old and above. It looks like you all qualify. Each reader gets between 3 to 5 minutes, depending upon how many people show up. This past Sunday, we were actually over legal capacity. So on Wednesdays at 1:15 in this room, in the ballroom, we offer an informal critique session. Writers, once again, 18 years old or older, are invited to bring in 10 copies of one single-space 12-point font, please, at the 6 or 4.5, piece of prose or poetry for feedback guided by a published writer, usually me. On Thursdays from 12 to 1, we've launched a new series, Locals at the Library. Each week, 2 to 3 Chautauqua authors will be available to sell and sign their work. If the weather permits, they're on the porch. If not, they're right inside the library. This week, we'll have a repeat offender. We'll have Marjorie Maddox both here today and at the library, and E.L. Warbitsky, who wrote The Marsh Keeper, a supernatural work of fiction. They will have their books and pens at the ready. And today, as part of the Tuesday Authors Hour reading series, 3 Chautauqua writers will present their work. After the first writer, I'll tell you more about these special events that don't occur every week that we sponsor. Books will be for sale after the readings, and we should also have some time for a short Q&A, so please file and remember any questions you might have. Our first reader, Jason Irwin, is the author of the memoir, These Fragments I Have Shored, as well as poetry collections, most recently, The History of Our Vagrancies. He was an intern at this very writer center in 2002, at the age of about 5, I believe, yes. In 2022, he was a Polyglossia Fellow and part of the Poetry Foundation's Disability Poetics Project. He lives in Pittsburgh with his wife, the writer Jen Ashbrook. Let's welcome Jason.
Hello, thanks for coming out. Thanks, Fred. My memoir is kind of about my relationship with my mother. I was born with a lot of birth defects, and she was my caregiver for a long time. And when she got cancer, the tables turned, and so that's what the memoir is about. And I'm going to read part of chapter 3 and then another chapter. This one is called The Likes of Me. My parents had been married for 2 years, 8 months, and 28 days when I arrived at 8:49 p.m. on a Saturday in July 1971. I had blue eyes, curly red hair, and numerous life-threatening birth defects. At full term, I weighed just 3 pounds, 11 ounces, about the weight of 10 avocados or your average ring-tailed lemur. When my mother went into labor, my parents were in Jamestown, New York, a town known for furniture manufacturing and the birthplace of Lucille Ball. My father dropped her off at WCA Hospital and then went to buy lottery tickets. Maybe as he drove, he heard Jerry Reed singing, "When you're hot, on the car radio. Maybe he hoped that the day his first child was born would be a lucky one. Did my mother, as she lay on the gurney alone in the hospital, recite the Hail Mary or pray to Saint Teresa, her favorite saint? Father Bernardo had told her that bringing a child into the world was the only reason for her and my father to marry. Whether or not this story was apropos, I'm certain that neither my father nor mother were in any way prepared for the likes of me. According to my mother, after delivering me, Dr. Dixon sat down and wept. A priest was summoned to perform the sacrament of last rites, so that if I died, I wouldn't be cast into everlasting limbo. Then I was rushed by ambulance to Buffalo's Children's Hospital, some 70 miles away. My mother had lost a lot of blood and gone into obstetric shock and didn't even get a chance to hold me. Before my arrival, my parents, Richard and Audrey Irwin, lived a typical small-town American life. They enjoyed long bicycle rides, antiquing, playing canasta, and spending time with family. They watched primetime television, believed in God and the righteousness of America. If you look through their wedding album, you'd see a couple in love. Take, for example, the mischievous look in my mother's eyes as she shoves a slice of cake in my father's mouth. Or the one of them standing outside the church, my father beaming with an awkward, almost embarrassed pride. They met in the mid-60s at a bowling alley in Dunkirk, the same bowling alley where years earlier my mother smoked her first cigarette. About their meeting, my mother wrote in her journal, "Rich wore Bermuda shorts. He was very handsome and was a good dancer." I've often wondered how my parents reacted the first time they laid eyes on me. Did they shudder the way the protagonist Henry in David Lynch's film Eraserhead shuddered as he unwrapped the bandages that hid his son like a mummy, only to reveal a creature part reptile, part alien, a head without a body, just a mass of organs and blood that spilled out like soup? Did disappointment spread across their faces like a rash? Did they hold each other? Did they cry for me, for themselves, for the life that would never be the same? Sometimes I envision it like a scene from a movie, wide shots, a windowless office, the camera pans left to right, a faint whiff of aftershave and ether permeates the air. Framed photos of the doctor with his wife and children hang from the wood-paneled walls, along with certificates and degrees. Photos of a fishing trip, perhaps, or the doctor and his wife posing next to the Colosseum in Rome. Cut to a close-up of the doctor, a middle-aged white man with unkept eyebrows and deep lines like dried-up rivulets carved into his face. He's sitting behind an imposing desk wearing an outdated tie. My parents sit across from him in matching leather chairs. My mother, still dazed from going into shock, stares at a point beyond the doctor's left ear, while my father's unblinking gray-green eyes focus on the carpet in front of him. "We have to be realistic," the doctor might have said, his metallic, monotone voice spooling out like some foreign language. "There's a strong possibility your son will be an imbecile, that he'll need constant care for the rest of his life. That is, presuming, of course, that he survives." My parents nod their heads in bewilderment. And this chapter is called Blaze of Glory, and it takes place in 1980. after my parents have separated, and I'm 9 years old. Music could always be heard in our house. Before the oldies station on my mother's cable TV, there were records, LPs and 45s that my parents listened to. We had a small turntable that looked like a suitcase and had a prominent spot on the wall-length bookshelf in my father's study. He even ran wires to the dropped ceilings and put a speaker in the bathroom so my mother could listen to music while she took a shower. I remember sitting on the floor watching my parents dance to Chubby Checkers, the twist, their bodies bending and gyrating as Checker called out, round and up we go, like a shaman, beckoning them to partake in this ritual of body and soul, while Joe Macho's bass kept the beats and Georgie Young burped arpeggios on the sax. After my father moved out, my mother transformed his study into a music room. Gone were his roll-top desk, his commemorative plate from Oral Roberts, as well as a framed picture of a chimp dressed in a three-piece suit. Gone were his stock charts that looked like EKG readings, his lottery magazines, and thick tomes on economics, all of which he studied like scripture. In their place, my mother dragged the tattered yellow love seat from the living room. She hung a poster of Elvis and a painting of Jesus exposing his sacred heart. She opened the curtains, hung spider plants and ferns in the bay window, and sprayed something that smelled like the lilac tree in our backyard. During this time, it had become my job to wake my mother each morning so she could help me get ready for school. Her clock radio went off at 7:15 a.m., and I'd hobble into her bedroom. The clock was just a few inches from her head on the nightstand, but it might as well have been down the street, for she never heard it. "Mom, it's time to get up," I'd shout. 5 more minutes, she'd beg, her eyes momentarily springing open. Then she'd turn over, pull the covers over her head, and groan, "Please, just give me 5 more minutes." I'd press the snooze button, run into the kitchen, turn on the Mr. Coffee maker, and then make her toast slathered with butter and powdered cinnamon. One December morning, I hobbled into my mother's bedroom and called her as usual. Instead of pressing the snooze button, I stood and listened to the radio announcer, who sounded as if he'd been crying. "John Lennon was assassinated outside his apartment in New York City last night," he said. "He was 40 years old." I had no idea who this guy Lennon was, but the word assassination filled me with a mix of fear and excitement. It sounded so adult, so cool. All that day and for the next few weeks, the radio and TV were abuzz about him and his former band, the Beatles. A week later, my cousin Aisha and I watched the televised memorial service. Thousands of people had gathered outside the Dakota. They stood crying and singing Lennon's songs, "Give Peace a Chance" and "Imagine." I soon became obsessed with everything Lennon, including the gory details of his murder. The same way I was obsessed a few years earlier with the film The Lincoln Conspiracy. I had begged my mother to take me to the theater just to see Lincoln's brains fly out of his head. Now my attention turned to Mark David Chapman, the Beatles fan who flew all the way from Hawaii just to shoot Lennon. And the 2 bullets that struck the left side of Lennon's back. One lodged in his aorta, destroying the major blood vessels above his heart on impact. I often fantasized about being assassinated, sometimes in the privacy of my room or standing in front of the bathroom mirror. I spoke in a reporter's voice and narrated the bloody scene. Irwin was found riddled with bullets, or the killer attacked Irwin with a hatchet. Was I psychotic? Was my obsession with being murdered some kind of internalized martyr complex that I learned from my mother? Did it foreshadow, along with my magic marker drawings of Jesus being crucified, or the G.I. Joe figures that I carved up and set on fire, some predilections of violence? Or was I no different from other boys my age who'd fallen in love with death, or at least the idea of it? Even though I couldn't articulate how, I knew that Lennon's death changed everything. After I found a copy of the Beatles' Revolver hidden among my mother's Elvis and Barry Manilow records, I listened to it constantly. It was as if I'd been reborn and my destiny revealed. I no longer wanted to be a firefighter, the quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, or Rocky Balboa. I'd be a rock star one day and go down in a blaze of glory. Why else had I been born? Why else had I survived so many hospitalizations and surgeries? Thank you.
Thank you for that very evocative and powerful readings. You can tell by the reaction, keeping a few words about special events that the Friends of the Chicago Writers Center sponsors before we get to our second reader. Since we're approaching, believe it or not, the halfway point of the season, one of the events has already passed. Every year we sponsor the Authors Among Us book fair. That occurred back on July 12th. And I think we had a record 20 authors take part. Very successful event. Please keep your eyes and ears open for it next year, mid-July. And if you're an author, please apply to take part in it. Consult our webpage, which is at chq.org/FCWC. The deadline for the annual writing contest is coming up August 2nd. So please, it's open to writers of any age. So if you have children or grandchildren who are writers, please urge them to submit. There are cash prizes. Once again, chq.org/FCWC. On Thursday, August 20th, the Friends will hold the annual Robert Pinsky Favorite Poem Project at 3:30 in the Hall of Philosophy. This tradition was initiated by Robert Pinsky himself 20-some years ago. At this gathering, selected Chautauquans read their favorite poems that aren't by themselves, okay? So no self-written nominations. And they explain why it means so much to them. And that's right, applications are available at chq.org/FCWC. I want to remind you again, books will be for sale afterwards, sale and signing, and looks like we'll have some time for Q&A. Our second reader is Marjorie Maddox. She is the host of Poetry Moments on WPSU FM, assistant editor of the journal Presence, and professor emerita at Commonwealth University. Marjorie Maddox has published 17 poetry collections. That's intimidating. Most recently, the collections Hover Here, Seeing Things, Small Earthly Space, and the intriguingly titled In the Museum of My Daughter's Mind, as well as the story collection, 5 children's books, and the anthologies Commonwealth, Contemporary Poets on Pennsylvania, and Keystone Poetry, of which she's the co-editor. She is the great-grandniece of Branch Rickey, the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, who helped break the color barrier by signing Jackie Robinson to Major League Baseball. Her middle grade biography, A Man Named Branch, the true story of baseball's great experiment, was recently published. And you can see more about her and her writings at www.marjoriemaddox.com. But we have her in person here. Come on, Marjorie.
Thanks so much, Fred. It's great to be back here. I was a visiting author here in 2016 and 2012. So it's been a little while since I've been back here, but it's really nice to be back in this building again. I'm going to read a little bit to kind of get our toes wet from 3 of the new books. So I'm going to start with Seeing Things, and this is my daughter's illustration on the cover. And we also did it in the Museum of My Mind together, where I responded to her artwork. But this is probably the hardest book that I've ever written. It's about 3 generations of women. So daughter of a mother entering the early stages of dementia, mother of a daughter struggling with depression, and then woman struggling with her own issues of survival, and this whole world of murkiness between truth and lie that we face in society today. So this first poem stemmed from the fear we often have, right, about not always being able to protect our children. And it's called Arise. And it's also about the Thailand cave rescue. Do you remember that? Where the soccer boys were trapped? Probably one thing I need to explain. When we were going through kind of a dark time in my family, a friend of mine asked her spiritual director to pray for our family. And he was a priest, and he prayed what I started calling the boulder prayer. He prayed that the stone would be rolled away from my daughter's darkness and that she would step out into the light. So that's referenced here. Arise. This is the prayer of all parents in whispers, in screams, in the near silent gasp sinking to groan outside the dark cave of the dead and the may be gone. Who can tell what the gruesome air is chewing? The unknown hovering its blind hope too high, too high. This is your language, this mine, lament swirling the undercurrent of belly, twisting the tunnel's neck into blind holes, dead ends, while the now maimed but still living parents beg, arise, come forth. Come forth, the doctor priest I don't know commands my child, who has barricaded herself behind boulders of her own making. Too large, she cries, when the divers swim under, around, instruct her to breathe more deeply the length of her labyrinth that turns now into stones not thrown, but shouldered by the belief of swimmers, by the petitions of ancients, by the precise calculations of strangers, marking the thin space between supplications, rising daily in a common language of grief or relief, swallowed again and again in the narrow cavern of waiting, someone else's words bobbing steadily in the dark night of the cold, the faithful ritual of rescue ready to begin again for this child and this one and even mine, miles below belief and barely breathing. And then, thank you. And then most of this book was drafted at Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. And those of you who have been to writing residency know that you spend a lot of time kind of curiously writing in your room or painting or whatever. And then you have this communal dinner. One night I came to the communal dinner and there was an artist who clearly did not want to sit down with me at dinner unless I was somebody famous. So she came out and asked me, and here's the title, The Artist at the Colony Asked Me If I'm Famous. If I'm someone she should know, pay attention to, bother having coffee with, talk with about the father who raped her at 12, about my father, about the slant of rainy light after you're weeping for half a life and then some, and when, if you leave the toilet paper unwinding from the top or bottom, I say from the top, and what our papa said the 2 days after, and avocados and kumquats and the strange geometric shapes that cascade into our dreams 5 days each year before the equinox. And if I'm well known enough for her to pry open my palm and slice my lifelines with an X-Acto knife, would I do that for her? And have I won a Pulitzer yet? And what color were the eyes of God when I looked straight at him for 3 minutes without blinking once? Okay, maybe once. And may she have that last bottle of wine. Could she borrow a glass? And how much does the New Yorker pay? Do I think they would consider her work because she started writing too? Have I slept with anyone there? And does the mold in my studio make my eyes itch in the morning or evening? She's heard both. Because she really wants to know about the time the London editor, who knew the New York editor, who knew me from someone at the colony or raved about my work on Eskimos or transplants or something like that, and later sat on a committee that judged that really important prize. She can't remember which one right now because, thanks again, she had a bit too much of my Merlot. But am I that writer, the one she's heard something about, the one she should know? No, I say, no. Though I am someone writing, trying to write someone. And I'll read a sonnet for my mother. This is called Dust. The way the clouds hang low, it could be noon or late fall. She doesn't know the season or the time. In her mind, the days make room for meals or bathroom trips. No reason to remember where, why. She knows someone will arrive to take her there, will prepare the necessary plans, will know the when of her leaving, the coat she'll need to wear to brace herself from cold. Perhaps it's snow that filters out the light. Perhaps it's dust, the long chill drawing close. And yet she hopes it's spring, late day, the world's worries hush as she slips now towards sleep. Always the gray darkens to night. She does not know the day. So that's Seeing Poems. Another new poetry book that came out in January is called Hover Here, which has both poems about pausing and kind of enjoying nature, but also some poems about urgency, about social and environmental justice. So I'll read 2 poems. One I thought might be appropriate for Chautauqua. When I was writing these poems, I had a wonderful studio that looked out onto a lake. So this is called Lone Boat on a Lake at Dawn. Not still, but still a still point among 2 diving loons and 1 blackbird flecked with red and barely balancing among the tallest pine this side of the lake. Even morning is relative, shadows undulating with waves slight as breath, amber almost out of reach, but ebbing closer. The way I hear you inside, stirring, deciding whether to rise and recognize off to the side of our vast bodies of deep and shallow waters, the one small lone boat, green maybe, or gray, floating a stranger whose face even now I cannot see, but who may be looking out at us, 2 different points of still, before each of us pass our lines of sight, real in the morning, that soon, in the limited minutes of beginnings, will be moving, moving, moving. And the last poem I'll read from this book is about Tyree Nichols, the murder of Tyree Nichols. Remember that? In Memphis. This also is a son. Remember that he was beaten by police and then died 3 days later. With cameras on, they raise their fists. He screams, "What reason?" He pleads. The armed men explain nothing. They are the law. Their actions need no meaning, no spoken explanation of the rage that beats and pounds. The others stand in silence or worse, look down, chit-chat about the latest game. He calls mother. Someone props him up, snaps a pic. Like that, a man becomes a corpse. 3 days he's dead. No rising from the blood. The ones who swore to guard and serve, just murderers instead. They claim he fled. The watching cameras bore another story. Even so, the men cite innocence. And here we are again. And then I'm going to read some short excerpts from a man named Branch, and as Fred told you, this is my great grand uncle, so I grew up with these stories. And one day as I was driving to work, this phrase popped into my head. His name was Branch, and in his brain was brewing a great experiment. I like the meter of it, and that becomes kind of a chorus. I'm going to read you just a couple paragraphs from the beginning and then a chapter where he has his famous interview with Jackie Robinson. His name was Branch, and in his brain was brewing a great experiment. Just like you, just like me, he started off as a kid. He started off as a kid in Duck Run, Ohio. Duck Run, you say? Yes, Duck Run, a tiny little town no bigger than your thumb on a map of the state that's round on the ends and high in the middle, Ohio. And ducks and farms, and in nearby Turkey Creek, a one-room schoolhouse where in 1898, Branch taught a whole room of schools when he was only 17. And that was kind of his first confrontation with bullies. These kids, who were his students, spat at him, started fist fights with him, but he somehow got them under control. And in many ways, this book is about standing up for others, standing up for bullies, and shows how this led to his standing up for Jackie Robinson, and how that in some ways paved the way for the civil rights movement. So those of you, how many of you saw the movie 42? Okay, so my great granduncle was Harrison Ford in the movie 42. And that also showcases that famous interview where Branch Rickey pretends to be a bully and a racist to kind of foreshadow for Jackie what he's going to be up against if he's willing to sign with Major League Baseball. Yes, Jackie had, so this is from the chapter, It's All Up to Jackie. Yes, Jackie had baseball talent, integrity, and spirit. But, Branch wanted to know, did he have the patience and self-control to win the larger battle and to ensure the success of the experiment? And so the intense interview of August 28, 1945 began. It lasted a long 3 hours. And he asked him if he has a girlfriend, and then he encourages them to marry her so they'll have some support. And by the way, Rachel Robinson just turned 104. So I'm going to skip a little bit. He had even more big questions to ask and buttons to push. Did Jackie have the guts? Not the guts to fight back, but the guts not to fight back. Now Branch really went into action. He pretended he was first this racist person and then that one. He ridiculed, he yelled, he jabbed his fist in Jackie's face. He called him all the names Jackie would be called. Get out. No room for you in this hotel, boy, from a hotel clerk. Get out. No food for you at this restaurant, boy, from a waiter. Get out. No seat for you on my train, from a conductor. Get out. No game for you at this ballpark, from a spectator. Get out. No place for you in our baseball, from a sports writer. And then Branch became a mean as they come bully ball player, pretending to slam into Jackie with his spikes. Take that. Could Jackie take it? Branch needed to know. Could he be more than just a good ball player and make the experiment work? It was all up to Jackie. Now Branch pulled out his much-loved copy of Life of Christ and started reading. Turning the other cheek means not receiving the second blow. It means cutting the chains of inevitable rights and wrongs. Your adversary is ready for anything but this. Could Jackie cut the chains of injustice and integrate baseball? Could he fight for equality by turning the other cheek? Could he do it for 3 whole years? Did Jackie have the courage to pay the price for progress? The now 63-year-old general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers gave the 26-year-old ball player a big helping of food for thought, and then he let him think. Mr. Rickey, Jack Roosevelt Robinson finally answered, I've got 2 cheeks. Jackie walked out of that office with a signed contract, and the experiment was on. Thank you very much. Next time, just got 1 month in. And this has family photographs, so here's me. And then if you flip through, you'll see some of the family photographs.
You're now a favorite.
You'll sit down and eat with me. Nothing with it.
Thank you so much. And you can get a closer look at that photograph if you come up to look at it and possibly buy some books. Just a few events this week, not sponsored by the Friends, but still of literary interest. Tomorrow at 12:15 down on the porch, the Summer on the Steps program will feature the, I believe, first poet laureate of Buffalo, Gillian Hainsworth, who will be giving a talk entitled The People's Poets, also a reading. Tomorrow on the plaza for young readers, sort of a discussion, sort of interactive games involving Ellie Schwartz's book, Same Page, which is the young reader book, and Cal Kalia-Yang's book, Home on the Page. On Friday at 12:15 on the porch, the community reading will feature spotlight readers from the Prose and Poetry Writers Center workshops of the week, plus the unveiling of the community poem. Remember, with the community poem, you have until 5 o'clock Thursday to go to poetry.chq.org to find out more about the prompt. I'm going to give you a short version, and to make a contribution that then might get integrated into the overall community poem. This week's, the short version of the prompt is to come up with a thought that somewhere in it incorporates the phrase, the reality of creating. You can get more details, as I said, at poetry.chq.org. And a final literary reminder, the CLSC author of the week will no longer be speaking on Thursdays. If you've been around, you probably caught on to that by now. And if you showed up Thursday at 2 o'clock, it was 3:30 rather, it was not the CLSC author of the week. We get kind of a double opportunity this week. On Friday at 2 o'clock in the Hall of Philosophy, Tessa Halls, the author of the graphic memoir Feeding Ghosts, will be speaking, but it's kind of a bonus. 10:45 on Friday in the end, Dave Eckers will be reading and talking about Contrapposto, his latest novel. You might remember him as the author of one of the greatest titles I've ever heard, A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius. It reminds me of my other favorite title. A poet, Tony Hoagland, wrote a book called What Narcissism Means to Me. That's comparable. Our final reader is a poet. Carol Townsend is a professor emerita of the Art and Design Department at Buffalo State University, where she taught and served as chair. Her poems have appeared in many journals, including Voices de la Luna, Salzir, The Healing News, the Cafe Review, and also the Buffalo News. One of her poems was selected for the public art project Bufflit on the Move. sponsored by Just Buffalo Literary Center and the Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority. That involved her poem being at bus stops. Was it also on buses or just bus stops? Bus stops. She has been an invited reader in The Gray Hair, I'm not sure why, Rooftop, Wordflight, Literary Cafe, Red Door, a musical festival, Drop Hammer, and the Buffalo Corner Reading Series. She is the author of the chapbook, A Cinder in My Name, and full-length books, The Color of Shadows and The Song of Leaves. Carol.
Thank you, Fred, for your endless service to the Friends of the Writers Center. Thank you very much. I'd like to give a shout out to the workshops that are offered by the Chautauqua Writers Center. Both the prose and the poetry ones are fantastic. And without which, especially the poetry workshops, I would not be a published poet today. Thank you, fellow poets, and all of you who have taken time out of your very busy Chautauqua schedule to come by today. I also like to give a shout out to the resident poet this week, Jim Daniels, who's invited. So I'd like to preface this by saying, as a poet, I am fascinated by the storytelling potential of poetry, tales of what it's like to be human. So I'm going to start off with a very funny tale from my chapbook, A Cinder in My Knee. And this is a picture of the barn. I grew up on a dairy farm in the middle of nowhere in the foothills of the Catskills. So my sister and I invented ways to entertain ourselves. This is called bread. Every Friday, 8 plump loaves emerged from the belly of our black and white enameled stove, one for each day of the week and one to be eaten warm, fragrant, with hunks of butter melted in. But then Mother discovered Wonder Bread. It's red, yellow, and blue balloons announcing already sliced. Soon after, on a 9-hour road trip, my sister and I invented ways to occupy ourselves in the back seat of the old Mercury, like sloshing saliva in our mouths until it foamed down our chins. Mother would become hysterical, sure that we were having a fit. Next, we discovered a new use for the new bread. Chunks pilfered from packed sandwiches. Just tear off crust, roll a piece between palms, spitballs without the spit, bomb each other, then eat the evidence. Why is it that mothers are always right when you're a teenager? Beyond me. This is called Mother was right. Gerald Agnes, my mother would admonish, you must move far away from here if you're ever going to meet anyone. Jimmy worked in the pizzeria, connected by black and white tiled floors to his father's barber shop. Its red lighted sign, missing bulbs, advertised hot slices, good for the last bite. He picked me up after work in his new convertible top down, and we drove along back roads to look at stars, he said. He pulled into a field of oats, tall enough to tower over the hood. We talked, we laughed, but soon Jimmy's hands began to wander. I was rescued by the farmer, whose flashlight beam bobbed as he crashed through the green, yelling that he had had enough. His prized crop was being ruined by young hoodlums night after night. Jimmy panicked, threw the car in reverse, flicking every stinging insect from its perch into the front seat. Red welts as big as pepperoni rose up on our faces, arms, legs. We itched, we scratched, itched again. In the driveway, as I jumped out, I told him to bug off. So there is a humor in tragedy, right? My second book was a full-length one called The Color of Shadows. And I'll read just a couple from that. This is the poem that was printed on the bus stops in Buffalo. It's a very short poem, but it's about poetry. Nest. Like a sparrow gathers grasses and threads for her nest, a safe basket for her brood, I collect scraps of thought on strips of paper that one day will be wound into poems, strong vessels to contain my life. Men in the audience, maybe you have found yourselves in this situation. February 13th. It's 10 p.m. and a knot of men are gathered at the local drugstore in the Valentine's section of the greeting card aisle. A 6-foot wide slope of sentiment. Pilgrims in a trance come to worship before a pyramid. Faces serious, foreheads glistening. Red velvet boxes and teddy bears sprouting from under armpits like misplaced organs. And they reach over each other's shoulders in pursuit of the perfect verse, the key that will open temple doors tomorrow night.
Whitest.
Here, a little more serious. This is called The Night My Sister's House Burned Down. True story. 6 o'clock. I am sitting at a stop sign waiting for traffic to clear and shaking my head in disbelief. Heat building up in the wall behind a wood stove is producing tongues that lick a pre-Civil War laugh, a blaze that refuses to leave shadow scorches upon plaster, instead whirling beds, dressers, chairs into evenly strewn ash. I see this from 200 miles away. Flames dancing above the tree line, leaping in orange. The phone call comes at midnight. I already know it happened at 6 o'clock. How tall the flames, how dark the night. And now several from my last book called The Songs of Leaves, and I did my own photography for the sections. I have a wonderful publisher who loves working that way, collaboratively. Okay, here's the Chautauqua poem. Has anybody here walked the labyrinth? Oh, a couple of people, good. This is called The Labyrinth at Chautauqua. I am a pattern echoing 4,000-year-old worlds found on a coin from Crete. I am a brain-like stem with sun-kissed lobes. I am stones, no two alike, clawed from a field and set into grass. I am aged, sunken, moss-covered. I am curved path. I am a place of solace where prayers and petitions are offered with no need to walk on one's knees. I am pilgrimage. At my center stands a storm-battered maple. Where a branch is missing, a wound seeps a river of sap, like tears shed. For this tree has heard too much, felt too deeply. All those hands touching and beseeching. Yet its leaves still sing their melodies, offering comfort as it dapples the sunlight, caressing bent shoulders below. For those of you who haven't visited the labyrinth, it's outside the gate by the Turner School. It's a little bit of a trek up there, but it's really a magical place. Okay, here's a bad travel poem. I hope the poem's not bad, the travel is bad. How a bad day becomes a fun poem. Dublin on O'Connell Street, between Murray's Pub and the Savoy Hotel, a pigeon or a seagull shot down a pale green glob, which landed on my beret, dripped across glasses, and me, with single tissue tucked into a pocket, my companions doubling over, which reminds me of the time in Maine when I tackled a whole lobster, a very small lobster, containing a very large amount of olive green goo that spurted, sprayed, finding its way inside shirt puffs into my hair, ears, and how the entire restaurant chortled. Or at the day at home, when a cupboard I opened sent a cascade of recipes, greeting cards, and a sea of emerald green notepaper to cover my brother-in-law's feet. He who had mocked me only moments before for saving way too much stuff. Oh, those red cheeks. I was mortified each time. When I don't want to remember about particular types of gleam, lives on in cocktail chatter, immortality, the luck of the Irish, you say? Where's my four-leaf clover? Down with the wearing of the green. Here's another Chautauqua poem. Was anybody here when Travis Tritt lit up the amp? The famous country western guy. It was a number of years ago, but it was really an experience. Travis Tritt tunes up the old amp at Chautauqua. Bass reverberates up through the floor, and its wooden pews upon which we perch. Marcy tosses her bleach blonde hair, says, "We may be blind as bats, but we sure can hear." She fans herself like a banshee, cools the whole row. She's from Nashville. Olivia's neck is pumping back and forth like a chicken swallowing grit. Cables thick as anacondas snake down from the catwalk. Think voltage. It's 90 degrees heat. Smoke machines crank up. Lights flash like the second coming. Like Jesus is going to bound onto the stage. But it is only famous Travis Tritt in leather pants. Hot. He spews hillbilly poetry, swilled whiskey, and the willing women loved too much. But it's the couples dancing in the back row, the full-bodied, sweaty contact, the hands caressing buttocks that gets to me. Think voltage. And lastly, I want to read a weather poem. As you well know, we have had the screwiest weather lately. but this was written in the throes of winter, and it is really about writing and poetry. It's called Weather. If words were snowflakes, I would be knee-deep in them. Write a novel. But I compose poems, choose few words, labor to reveal pavement hidden beneath. With shovel, I remove snow from sidewalks for paperboy and mailman. I bend to examine leaves, frozen fast against icy earth, their songs long silenced. With pen, I arrange words on the page, attempt to clear a path between you and me. Thank you very much.
When our two authors come forward to see if there's any questions they can answer. As well, answer the questions through the microphone. I have one question for all of you to contemplate. Marjorie and Jason, you write poetry and prose. Carol, you write poetry and prose, but you're also a visual artist. How do you know which medium to use? Poetry, prose, paint or sculpture or fabric or whatever.
Well, I'm a trained ceramicist, but I have a very bad back. And so I transitioned my creative energy into something that's less stressful on the body. And so with, paper napkin and a pencil, I can be creative. I am enamored with poetry at this point because of the compression and the urgency to compress. And I love the process of revision to try to make what I write clearer and clearer in terms of clearing that path between myself and the listener or the reader. And so I'm pretty stuck on poetry right at the moment.
Jim Dan's almost answered this question the other night, so I have the temptation to have him answer it again. But I think that it just depends on how much room I need. Sometimes I will write a series of poems if I feel like I need a lot of room to examine the topic. Sometimes I will examine the topic both in poetry and in prose. I find it reappear. With the Branch book, I tried several times to get that book started, but it was not until I had that phrase, his name was Branch and in his brain was brewing a great experience, which I think of more as kind of almost poetic and metered, that I was able to kind of get into it. But it has to do, I think, with how much space I think I'll need.
I think my poetry has basically led up to my memoir. A lot of my poems are about the same subjects of family, but I prefer poetry, and it was a slog writing the memoir.
We have time for a question or two if anybody has one. Yes.
I feel like I was playing one line where I'm starting to write poetry. I have to start, but it's just coming. And so, what would you say to encourage? I don't know where I'm going and when I'm trying. Or even why I'm doing.
Could you say that again? I didn't hear all of it.
Well, she's starting poetry at this point in her life, wants to know any advice or any paths forward. How do you start? And aside from taking a writer-centered course, which we find that recommend, but any other advice?
And in addition to that, I would say just dive right in. I mean, the best way to learn how to do it is to start doing it and to practice, get some feedback from some other people, read a lot.
just let stuff fall out of your head. Just let it happen. And you know, the best advice that I ever got is get that shoebox and just throw those thoughts on scraps of paper into the shoebox. Don't treat anything as too precious initially. Eventually, as you look through your little nest that you made, things will become clearer and you'll notice that there will be connections between these supposedly random thoughts. And that's when the real work begins.
And even your phone, sometimes I can put little notes on my phone, you know, that I think of, and then come back to it later.
Just read a lot and don't give up. Keep writing.
You want to emphasize that reading a lot, okay, and even reading authors you don't think you like. Okay, and it's never too late. I published my first book at age 72. Okay, so that's okay. And now I'm 50. You know, it's a fancy.
That's a poem in itself.
Any other questions? Let's give another round of applause. Oh, is there a question? Okay.
You earlier about, and I didn't quite catch it all, a section of people could read what they wrote.
Oh, tomorrow, yes. Tomorrow at 1:15 in this room, bring in 10 copies of one page of your prose or poetry. It can be single spaced, but we do insist on 12-point font, okay? And the group will give you some feedback. If you can't make copies, talk to me afterwards. We have a way of making copies or printing it out. Okay, a round of applause. Can I do now? Then I do have some announcements. You can take seats if you want. Just some upcoming events. Want to remind you that our sister art, the Chicago Theater Company, is very busy this week. The commissioned world premiere production of Best for Baby is continuing. Very provocative, very funny, very pushing the envelope a little bit, but if you'd like to have your envelope pushed, please see it. They call it, I think, a very funny tragedy, and I think it qualifies. They're doing a new play workshop which is kind of a reading, usually at music stands, of The Motions starting Thursday. And on Saturday, there's a brief reappearance of The Bone Wars, which they had done earlier. Please join us next week for the Authors Hour on Tuesday, weather permitting down there, but this has been a great session up here. Carol Jennings will be reading her poetry, especially from the Sustained Pedal. Yvette Beckett-Tuggle will be reading some nonfiction from a book entitled The Heartfelt Voice, a writing guide for people to affirm, encourage, and empower. And the Reverend Reggie Tuggle will be reading from a memoir, A Journey Through Grace. Please consider joining the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center to help sponsor the events you mentioned. Want to remind you that a video of this reading will be available on YouTube sometime later today. In fact, we have videos of all the readings since 2020 when we all went virtual, right? If you look for the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center channel, it's important to say channel because then you'll get all of them as opposed to stray ones. Also, in my absent-mindedness, I do have a bunch of free bookmarks that I'm going to give out because we were busy telling people where we were supposed to be. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. It was very gratifying to see such a crowd.